Hi, I'm Nathan, and in this video we're going to take a close look at the landmark tool in syGlass and explore how it can be used to place landmarks, both point and patch landmarks, across different samples that you load as projects in syGlass. Here's an outline of this tutorial. We'll start with how to establish your landmarking protocols, the types, the names, the colors of landmarks that you'll place across the scenes and samples. Then we'll move on to actually placing the most basic of landmarks in VR. This is a point landmark. We'll talk about creating surfaces, which are the structures onto which patch landmarks can be snapped. And then, of course, we'll talk about how to place these patch landmarks and how to adjust them in VR. We'll discuss modifying protocols, the landmarking protocols in VR. And finally, we'll talk about exporting the landmark positions out of syGlass so that they can be analyzed downstream. We are here now in syGlass with our friend the chameleon, who will be the subject of the image that we'll be landmarking today. And to get started, we'll first just need to define the landmarking protocol for this work. And the protocol is just going to be the list of structures, essentially, that we're going to be landmarking across samples. So I'll go to Project up here after selecting the chameleon, or the name of the project in this left panel. Go to Project, Landmarks, and Create Landmarks. And here you'll see that there are two different kinds of landmarks available. There are point landmarks and patch landmarks. Point landmarks are the simplest of landmarks. They're just positions and sizes, and the name of the structure associated with that position and size. Patch landmarks create a grid of landmark points that snap to the surface of the image, sort of a flexible grid in that you can drag it around. This allows you to get multiple samples of location across a larger structure. So we'll start with point landmarks, and I can add some point landmarks using this button here. I'm going to generate two of them, which will just populate this with the names LM2 and LM1, landmark 1 and 2. This will be a semicolon delimited list of the landmark names. So I'll have the two names of my structures here, with a semicolon between them. You can add as many as you'd like here, all separated by semicolons. There's also an option to allow placement, multiple placement for each landmark. This is an option that you would use if there is some unknown number of these structures in your samples. For example, if you'd like to landmark something where there may be more than one of them, you can check this box, and then you can place more than one of a given landmark. Otherwise, each landmark is expected to appear once, essentially 0 or 1 times in the scene. So I'll save these landmarks. They become available in the list. I can change the color if I'd like, but for now these are okay. You can also change the multi-placement status after the fact, delete individual landmarks using this button, or you can delete all of the landmarks using this button here. So now let's create a few patch landmarks. I'm going to use patch landmarks for the eyes. So I have left eye and right eye here in my protocol. And because we already have a green here, I'm going to swap that for orange so that we have all different colors, make it easier to visualize the scene at the end. And I'm going to increase the grid size here to 9 by 9. This is the number of point samples that occur on the grid. So for larger structures, you may want a larger number of samples here. That's the creation process for the protocol. You can also export this protocol as a CSV file using the Export Landmarks button. You can import it into another project using Import Landmarks here. You can also go to Project Landmarks and copy Project Landmarks, and then select one or more projects to which you'd like to copy the protocol, and use the Paste Project Landmarks option here. So that makes it easier to define the protocol just once and to apply it across many projects. So that's the creation of the protocol. Next, we'll get started with actually placing some of these landmarks in the scene. Okay, I'm now here in VR, and I'm going to equip on my right controller the landmark tool, which can be found here. You'll see then at the end of my controller I have a point and the name of the landmark that I'm about to place. And my goal now is just to decide on the position and size of this landmark in the scene. And to change the size, I can rotate the joystick in a circular fashion to make this larger or smaller. I can also resize the sample with respect to this thing to make it larger or smaller with respect to the chameleon here. You can change which landmark you're currently using with the previous and next landmark buttons here. You can also press the joystick and use these options to advance to the next landmark or to go to the previous one. So I have the left nair here. I'm going to size this appropriately, and I'll pull the trigger with my index finger to place it. Then I can place the label out in space, somewhere visible here as well. And I'll repeat that process for the right nair. You can also move an existing landmark here by pulling the trigger and adjusting it to wherever you'd like. And you can delete a landmark by holding down the grip button, which is probably beneath your middle finger. It's right here on the side of the controller, passing it over a landmark and pulling the trigger to delete it. Go ahead and place this back. We have our 2-point landmarks here. Now next, before we move on to patch landmarks, we're going to talk about surfaces and how to create a surface. There's just one more thing before we go there I'd like to talk about, and that's these options for landmark size and label size. These just change the visual size of the labels or the landmarks in the scene. They don't change the recorded size. So you want these to stay about 1 as you're placing the landmarks, most likely, but you can change these later for visualization purposes. Similarly, you can turn off the visualization of landmarks, of the labels, or down here of an individual landmark. So that's point landmarks in a nutshell, and we'll get started next on our patch landmarks. Now, you may notice that we have not yet placed our patch landmarks, even though they were part of our protocol. And that's because there are some prerequisites for the placement of patch landmarks. The patch landmarks snap to surfaces in the scene, and then they can be sort of morphed along those surfaces, but we need to create some surfaces here. And there are a few options to do that. I'm going to do that from within syGlass. So I'll go here to visualization. I'm going to turn on view mask data to create an ROI that wraps the entire project by default. You could also use the region of interest tool, the ROI tool here in VR, to define an ROI that may not cover the entire volume if you just need to create surfaces for some small piece. But regardless of how you do it, you'll then want to fix the resolution of the ROI so that all of the image data within the ROI is at the same resolution level. That will allow us over here in the Meshes tab to then create a mesh or a surface that wraps this image. And this will be based on the threshold set in the visualization settings. Now, by default, create from masked area may be on your machine. You can leave this on if you've done some segmentation, some masking using the ROI tool to define the area which you'd like to turn into a surface. But in our case, we want just a surface that wraps the entire image. So I will leave this off. I'm going to add a little bit of smoothing here just to create a smoother result. You can tune this to your liking. And then I will create surfaces down here at the bottom. And I'll press create. This will take just a moment to do, but in the end, we will have a surface or a mesh appear here on the chameleon that will become the basis of our patch landmarking. So I'll go ahead and hit save here. And now we have a surface that covers the chameleon, and this is what we'll snap the eye patch landmarks to. I'm just going to quickly change the color of this surface to white, so it's a little bit higher contrast with our eventual landmarks, and I'll just relaunch the project to allow that change to trickle down into the viewing window here. This orange bounding box means that a mesh is loading, and then here is our mesh. If you have pre-existing meshes that you'd instead like to import into syGlass, you can do that in the Project Surfaces menu here. You can click Add Surfaces and add your surfaces in a number of formats, including OBJ, FBX, STEP, and GLB. So that is the process of creating a mesh or a surface for your project. Now that we have that, we can go back in and begin to place those patch landmarks. Okay, I'm now back in VR and I'm ready to place my patch landmark. You'll notice that when you have a patch landmark selected, there will be a laser emitted from the controller, and that laser terminates when it hits the surface. I can point this laser at the surface onto which I'd like to apply my patch landmark, and a grid of points will appear. So I'm going to point it at the portion of the eye that I'm interested in here, and I'll pull the trigger. And I have now this grid of patch landmarks, and I can drag these so that they sit over the portion of the eye that I'm interested in. Make this a little larger so it's easier to do. And I'll drag these boundaries of the grid until they cover the portion of the eye I'm interested in. You can also delete these the same way you deleted point landmarks, by holding the grip button on the inside edge of the controller and pulling the trigger over one of these patches. So I'll just go ahead and place these again, drag them around. And next we'll take a look at changing the protocol from within VR, if you need to make an on-the-fly adjustment to your protocol, before finally talking about how to export all this information from syGlass. Now let's take a look at a few options for modifying a protocol from within VR if you need to make an on-the-fly adjustment to the protocol. That all happens down here at the bottom of the tool menu. You can see the currently selected landmark is left there. I can show and hide that individual landmark if I'd like, but I can also make a change to the protocol, changing the color, for example, by clicking this color, this square of color. Then I have a color picker here, and I can change the hue at the top and the color ultimately here. Let's make this pink, and you can see it's changed to pink. You can also change the name, the label of the landmark. If I wanted, I could call this left nares, and you'll see the label has changed there. I'm going to undo that change. You can also reset the name of the landmark, erase the name of the landmark, which will revert it to something like landmark 2 using this erase button. And finally, you can change the multi-placement status. If you find midway through your landmarking that you have some samples that have multiple of one of these features, you can adjust the multi-placement status here, and we will immediately be ready to place another landmark of that type. So that's just a quick look at how to modify the protocol in VR. Next, we'll take a look at exporting all this information and a few different ways that we can do that. Now that we have both our point and patch landmarks placed, it's time to take a look at how we can export this data from syGlass and analyze it downstream. The easiest way to do this is to select the project in the panel on the left, go to Project, Landmarks, and Multi-Project Export. This option allows you to select multiple projects potentially. If you have more than one sample landmarked from the project list, you can perform that multiple selection by holding the Control key as you select, or holding the Shift key as you select to select a range. Here I have just one project, but I can still use this option. And there's an option to export a combined file, which is a single summary CSV file for all of the selected projects, or export individual files, so one file for each project selected. Here I will do export individual file. You can select the coordinate frame in which the landmark positions will be exported. So we want the bottom corner of the image data to be the origin, and we want this in voxels in our case. If you wanted these in millimeters or microns, for example, you could select physical units, and the coordinates will be reported in the unit that is the voxel size for the project, which you can find in project and then voxel size. But in this case, let's stick to bottom left corner in voxels. So I'll go ahead and save this. I'll save this as single here. It's a single project. And you'll see that the result is a CSV file that can be opened and processed in Excel or Google Sheets or other software. And you have the name of each label here, the red, green, blue RGB color code for the point, the type, which is either point or patch type of landmark, the radius in the selected unit of the landmark, and the X, Y, and Z coordinates in the coordinate frame that we selected earlier. We also have the coordinates of the label itself, and we have a field here, extra Y and extra X. These are just internal implementation details that are important for re-importing these back into syGlass. Finally, for patch landmarks, you'll see we have the mesh name. This is the name of the mesh that the patch landmark is attached to. And this sort of rounds out the information that you get in these CSV files. Now, there is another way to do this. You can also go to Project Annotations, select the landmark cell in the grid here for the selected experiment, and press Export Selected. This will also allow you to define the name of a CSV file containing that information and to save it. So that's how you would export this information as CSV. Again, if you have multiple projects that you've landmarked, you can select them all here and use the multi-project export to get them all either combined or as individual CSV files. Okay, that's it for the landmark tool tutorial. If you still have other questions, you can comment here if you're watching this video on YouTube. You can also send us an email at info@syglass.io, or you can visit us online at syglass.io. And if not, I will see you in the next video.